The Self-Publishing Show is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid. Pro Writing Aid has been my go-to tool for revising and refining my writing since my first book. Built by writers for writers, it's more than just a grammar and spell checker. Pro Writing Aid helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. It can even provide on-demand developmental feedback on your entire manuscript with its new manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Get ahead of the competition by heading to prowritingaid.com and sign up for free using the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.
Publishing is changing. No more gatekeepers. No more barriers. No one standing between you and your readers. This is the Self-Publishing Show. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome. Yes, it is the Self-Publishing Show with me, James Blatch. I am back. It's been a while. In fact, I looked it up. It was the 26th of July 2024 when we signed off. That was episode number 432 back then with Joe Solari and Darren Hardy from Amazon Europe. And we went into hiatus. So what's that? 18 months, something like that. But we are back, and we're going to be back for some time. And who knows, maybe another 432 episodes. It became one of the centerpieces, I think, of the indie publishing world, our podcast. And I know because I get so much feedback, and often when I'm standing in a lift or an elevator in America and I start speaking, someone says, "I know your voice," and because they've been listening to me on their treadmill. And I know a lot of you didn't realize, but there was another podcast actually on the go during that time. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that in this episode. So this is episode number 433. It's just going to be me, a solo episode. I'm going to talk to you a bit about why we're back and what to expect from the show in the future, a bit about what's going on with Learn Self-Publishing and my writing. And next week, I am going to be revealing to the world the brand new co-host of the Self-Publishing Show, which I'm very, very excited about. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what's happened whilst I've been gone. So the first thing is, the reason really for pausing the podcast is it became quite a burden. I mean, podcasts are, anybody who does a podcast, you talk to Joe Penn or I know quite a few of you have your own podcast, so you will know that a lot of work goes in every week. Our podcast became a bit of a beast. I had 6 people working on it. We had artwork and interviews, and frankly, I think we were doing things in an old-fashioned way. We just got stuck in our groove. Some of the people who came up with a system of doing it when there wasn't tools and technology to help had stayed that way. So we ended up with this lumbering project. I did the separate interviews, which looking back, we could have changed, but it felt to me like I was doing sort of interviews on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I was recording the episode on Wednesday or Thursday, and it was dominating a lot of the week. I was becoming quite stressed about it because I have a big to-do list on any one day of the week. And in particular, my writing had completely suffered. And it's like the last thing I get to in those old days before I reorganized myself was writing. And there has been a bit of a reorganization of myself and the way that I operate. So I'll talk to you about that today as well. And also I think my philosophy towards indie publishing has changed and developed a little bit with things as they are rapidly changing at the moment. But I sort of missed the podcasting, and I wanted to start an easier to manage podcast, and one, frankly, that was easier to listen to, one that was just people chatting about the industry that we know and love. And I was getting a lot of benefit out of a couple of author WhatsApp groups. So there's one in particular that I'm in every day, and we're great friends, and I don't know where I'd be without that particular author group. It's such an important part of my life. And so I wanted the podcast to feel like that experience, particularly for people who didn't have many author friends, and they wanted to be part of a community where they could ask questions and discuss all the stuff that's happening to us in our industry. So I started the Indie Writers Club, and it had a podcast which ran for 74 episodes. My co-host, Cara Clare, a romance author, she writes a range of genres, women's fiction through to romance. and some of it's wholesome and clean, some of it's spicy and dark. I've read a couple of her books. I would thoroughly recommend her. She's got a really good book coming out soon, which is a retelling of Chatterley, of Lady Chatterley's lover, in a vampire environment. I mean, it's a gothic novel to start off with, so it's a really good idea. That's coming out soon. And what you've got, if you weren't aware that we had that podcast and you haven't listened to the Indie Writers Club, there is now those 74 episodes, which I would recommend if you wanted to go back and listen to a few. We've covered quite a lot of subjects which I think are relevant and pertinent to the way that we operate. So we've talked about author scams. Since AI came along, there's been a real rise in author scams, and a lot of them are very convincing in the first instance. And one of them I actually followed all the way through to the point where we got the bank account closed down in Texas. So you can follow that episode. If you go to indiewritersclub.com, that's the website, and you click on the podcast audio tab or video tab, you'll get a list of all these episodes, and you can find them. Their various numbers. We talked about alternative income streams for authors, not just in your books. We had an episode dedicated to those Pixar rules of storytelling, which we analysed. We talked a lot about AI, and I'm going to talk about AI in a minute. I'm going to set out my position on AI, the position of this podcast on AI, so that we're all on the same page. And if you don't want to be a part of it, that's absolutely fine. We respect that, but fair dues, we are going to be talking about AI on here. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But we talked about copyright issues to do with AI, the legalities. We had a brilliant episode about using AI as your assistant and how powerful that can be. And we always covered the latest tools that's coming out. A few fun episodes actually are films. So we looked at a few big films. In particular, we were drawn to those big films that we felt for some reason didn't really work. They didn't land properly. And I think that's more interesting to us than a film that's absolutely brilliant. We can talk about, Gladiator is a great example. It's one of my favourite films, Gladiator, and I think the story is superb. I think it's so simple to follow. You know who you're rooting for at every one point, and you laugh and you cry at all the right moments. But Gladiator 2 was almost the pole opposite of that for me. I felt confused through it. I wasn't entirely sure how the story was going. I wasn't sure at any one point who I was supposed to be rooting for. And so we had an episode dedicated to discussing that and trying to analyse what went wrong in our view with Gladiator 2. We had another one similarly about Hamnet very recently, actually. I think it was like the penultimate episode. We talked about Hamnet, which is the film about Shakespeare and his wife losing their son, Hamnet. And again, neither of us felt the film landed properly, and so we talked about what that was, and that's an interesting one because it's about that emotional side of our writing, which is such an important part of it, and whether we earn the right as writers to have our readers crying, whether we've done enough, etc. If that's what you want to do, you might not write those sort of books. We had an episode on how to get your book made into a Hollywood film with an actual Hollywood screenwriter, T.D. Donnelly. More about him in a moment because I'm going to talk about future guests coming up. We had episodes on plotting, on editing, on drafting, episodes on selling direct. So we didn't have a lot of guests, but Adam Beswick came on to talk about selling direct and doing TikTok lives. And I know that a few of the listeners at the time took that to heart because on my TikTok feed, I'm suddenly seeing a few people I know listen to the show now doing very similar sets of lives where they're selling books. And Adam is going great guns with his lives. In fact, I saw one the other day. It was brilliant. He was in his car saying that the head gasket had blown or something like that, and it was going to cost 600 X pounds, and this is how many books he needed to sell during the day to pay for that. So he was doing lives later to get the book sold to pay for his head gasket. And it was such a clever thing for me to see that because Adam gets that. My light's just fallen over. Adam gets that readers are into you as much as they are the books, that you are part of what it is that they're buying when they buy a book from you. And that connection with readers has never been more important. It's never been more important because of AI, which is obviously doesn't have a human connection, but it's never been more important because, again, AI is probably underneath this, but because the advertising platforms we've had are not working in the same way that they used to. But what is working, and I can tell you from my position looking out onto the industry, what is working are those authors who have good followings, human followings. So You have an active mailing list, active Facebook groups, you have active social media, you engage with your readers, you have Kickstarters and things like that. So all sorts of other possibilities come up when you have your own audience, and that's been very important. So never more important. One old-fashioned thing that's never been more important is to build your mailing list, and that's still the same, and it's still the heart, I think, of a good indie author operation, unless you particularly hit one social media platform and that's where your audience is. But that's dangerous because that social media platform might suddenly change and you don't really own those readers. So we're going to talk about some of those subjects again in more detail. We'll probably have some of those guests on again in the next few weeks. So I'll talk about that in a moment. But let me first of all say a big thank you and a welcome to our sponsor, because they sponsored the Indie Writers Club and they are going to be the sponsor of this show as well, and that is Pro Writing Aid. Now, I've been a fan of Pro Writing Aid, of the work that Chris and his team have been doing for years. Really early on in my drafting, I used Pro Writing Aid so that I actually save money on editors, because you're handing over your first manuscript to them, whether it's development or line or proof editing later, having done a lot of that typo work and a lot of that tightening of the language. And the platform for me is getting better and better. In particular, and if you haven't used this, I'd absolutely recommend you check this out. They have a brilliant manuscript critique tool. So it's above and beyond the cost of membership. So I think I have PWA for life. I bought it a few years ago, and they do deals every now and again on that. But however you've purchased PWA, it will be extra. So it's I think it's up to about $50 per go, but they often have sales. And I picked up at Christmas, I think I picked up 4 or 5 tokens at half price, so they're at $25 each. And for that, not very much money, frankly, you get a fantastic breakdown of your manuscript. It tells you all sorts of things about what's working, what's not working, where there are problems, sort of red light problems through to amber light problems. It picks up all sorts of stuff. So one of my friends on one of our WhatsApp groups, we were talking to her about her dark moment. She, by nature, is a very sort of loving person and doesn't like putting her characters in deep peril. And the manuscript critique actually picked out that, and it said you're using devices to cushion your character from that dark moment. So that's the level of detail. So she knew she had to strip that out and work on that again. So I would really thoroughly recommend that. So PWA are going to be our sponsor, and there'll be a discount, I think. I'm sure it is. The link will be recorded, I'm sure, at the front and back end of this by me before this goes out in a couple of days' time. One thing I'm also going to mention whilst on the subject of Pro Writing Aid is they have just launched Novel Beginnings, which is a fantastic looking contest where you can win $50,000. It's aimed at authors who are getting started. It's aimed at authors, I think, who otherwise would find it difficult to have their voice heard in the industry. And so you can submit your manuscript. If you go to PWA and just type in Novel Beginnings, but I think it is prowritingaid.com/introducing Novel Beginnings, and you can have a look at the rules of the contest. But the grand prize is $50,000 for somebody, and there are 9 runners-up prizes of $5,000, and even $5,000 is an amazing amount of money to get you started. $50,000 is like a lottery win, but $5,000 will get you started and get a lot of that, the stuff that we can't avoid having to pay for as indie authors. Get that paid for you and get your career up and running. So we'll feature it more as we get towards the deadline, and we'll perhaps have one of the guys on to talk about it, perhaps Haley, or at some point to talk about exactly what they're looking for and some tips on entering. So what are we going to talk about on the self-publishing show? The return of the self-publishing show. We are going to have a few more guests than we've had on with the Indie Writers Club. So most weeks I think it is still going to be me and my mystery co-host. We are going to look at what's happened in the industry that week, and we're going to talk about it, how it's affected us, how it's affecting you. We'll bring some latest thinking on the subject. So if you're in the indie space, again, I want that feeling that you've got a group of friends and you've got a community who you're chatting with about what's going on, because it's very important, particularly for an industry where we very often work in isolation. So But we are going to have some guests, and I was thinking about in the next few weeks having Dana Clare on, or Dana probably in America, probably pronounced Dana Clare, from Influence. So I think this is a very important area, and Dana's a bit of a leader in this area because she has a company that works with authors to exploit their IP, which is a horribly commercial sounding term, but it basically means you spent a year writing a book, and in the old days you'd publish it. Okay, you'd publish it in a couple of different formats. So you might have Kindle edition and print edition, but now with special editions, now with Kickstarter, and now with merchandising. I mean, she was telling me about some romance authors who now have jigsaw puzzles based on their books and their series. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities, and she's a company that works with authors to do that. Now, she works at quite a high level with quite big authors, direct printing and so on. But we're going to talk to her about the whole concept and how perhaps we could transfer that into those of us who are doing it at a lower level at this stage, how we can make the most of that idea of really making the most of our books. And on that subject, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about AI translations, because I think this is a really important area, and it's an area I am very deep in the weeds on. But before then, let's talk about AI, because AI is controversial, right? And I know it's just the nature of our industry. Feelings are running pretty hard on AI, and there will be some of you who think it's the devil. In fact, there was somebody, I think 2 years ago, Author Nation, who opened his talk by saying, I think AI is the devil, and I will not be mentioning it. And a few people walked out because they thought, well, AI is like the latest thing and the tool, and we need to understand it. So they thought this talk wasn't going to be of much use. So that's kind of the downside of that. So which side of the AI fence am I on? Well, I am very firmly 2 feet on the ground in favor of AI. I say in favor of AI like you have to be in favor or against it. AI is here. The genie is out of the bottle. There's absolutely nothing anyone can do about that. That is just fact. It's being used brilliantly, positively, and nefariously. There's no question about that. Now, the first clue to us was probably about 2 years ago, was it, when KDP quietly said to everybody, Amazon KDP said they're going to limit how many books you can upload in a day and publish, and they limited it to 3. And most of us are thinking, well, the KDP environment is set up for self-published authors. Funny enough, we use it. It's a brilliant platform, and I love KDP because the amount of data and information you get is second to none. We use it as a publishing company, which does create some problems. And one of the problems are it really based on the fact that it is designed for a self-published author, that platform. Or which self-published authors are uploading 3 books a day or more than 3 books a day? The fact that KDP had to limit it, and this was like 2 years ago. I think it was something like that. That was a clue that people are using AI to publish dozens of books every day and upload to KDP. And if you have a factory set up where you've designed all the prompts and you're outputting all these books and outputting the covers using Midjourney, you don't need to make a lot of money per book. It's a different market, it's a different way of doing it. Now, my view is, good luck to you. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. It's problematic for us, but who am I to say I would like other people in the industry to act differently to benefit me? That's not how I look at it. I look at it like this. Those books were never going to be in serious competition with human written books. Most of us, whether we like to admit it openly or not, and I will admit it, have played with writing with AI. I'm drafting at the moment, and every now and again, I go back to it and I think, okay, so if I give everything I've done so far to AI, and I tell it what I want in this scene, will it write a good scene? And for me personally, maybe I'm using it wrong, it never really does that. I just read it and I think, well, it's not my writing, so it takes away the blank page. If you're getting really low on energy and you're really low on ideas and you just want the scene written, it takes away that blank page that you can then rewrite or disregard completely. But for me, that's kind of in the writing, that's where it is. And it's, I look forward to writing, and I barely ever open the AI when I'm drafting. After I finish drafting, I am absolutely all over AI, not least ProWriting Aid has a lot of AI built into it. But I also use it for research, I use it for checking some of the scenes that they scan and they flow properly and get some feedback on that. The manuscript critique technique is fantastic in PWA. I use it for images. I love it for images. Now, I write Cold War historical fiction. Do you know how difficult it is to get pictures? I mean, I've got if you're watching on YouTube, so this is the final flight. There's a picture of a Vulcan bomber. Ideally, that bomber would be in anti-flash white because that's what colour it is in the book, but we're very limited on pictures that you can use. We have to obviously pay for that from a stock library, and it's a modern picture, not a 1960s vintage aircraft. One of my other books, which is on the shelf behind me, we didn't even get the right aircraft. We got a Swedish or Swiss, perhaps a Swiss export version of it from the 50s. And of course, my audience, and they know these sort of things, and they got back to me. Now, there was a good image of one, but it was with Parthe, and Parthe wanted £700 to use it, which I just thought was extortionate for that picture. Now, funnily enough, I got speaking to Parthe, my friend Robin Bennett Freeburn, who writes brilliant non-fiction books in Cambridge, got in touch with Parthe. He's a very heavy user of photography, and it turns out it was just a conversation, and Parthe were completely open to the idea of reorganising their model to suit the indie world, and they did. And I ended up buying that image for something like £70, much cheaper, and we got it changed onto the book. Now, I'll still go to those original images from time to time, but to get exactly what I want, AI has been a boon. Midjourney is my one of choice, but there's Leonardo and there's others around as well. It will now produce authentic looking aircraft from that period. And another thing, this is a bit nerdy, only pertains to me, but it's an example. There's a fantastic collection of RAF pilots wearing obviously exactly the right gear because it's contemporary pictures taken of them in the 50s and 60s. A really big collection, and they're great, and I'd love to cut them out. Like, for instance, on the front cover of my very first copy of The Final Flight, it had one of these pilots walking away from camera on the front. But they are owned by the Imperial War Museum. A bit of a bugbear of mine, by the way. They were taken by the government, they're Crown copyright. Why the IWM has this sort of the law now, I don't know why they have dominance over them and have ownership of them, but they do. The IWM is the Imperial War Museum in the UK, and they were very snobby. When I said, how do I license this image? They said, well, what do you want to license it for? I said, well, I want to write a book. What sort of book? Well, it's a novel. Who are you publishing it with? Well, I'm publishing it myself. Well, we don't think that's a suitable use of our photographs, which drove me insane, as I'm sure it would you as well. And again, I'm thinking these are public pictures taken of the Royal Air Force, paid by taxpayers. Why are they in a drawer at IWM, and why are they saying no to people? I should probably have just used it and put Crown copyright on there and then try to work out how I'd defend it in court. But now I don't need to, because Midjourney can produce those images. It can get people looking as they did in the 1950s and 60s, and that's amazing, and I can get them in exactly the right pose. I was speaking to some science fiction authors yesterday who said it's been an absolute godsend to them because they had the same old generated graphics from the same cover designers for years. Which brings us on to the point about cover designers and people losing their trade from this. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to say about this, so there are many issues, there are many assets to this debate on AI, I understand that, and we'll talk about them stealing images and stealing copyrighted works in a moment. But in terms of you are taking income from other people, you're taking money away from people alongside you who are working, that is not an argument. Let me be crystal clear about that. There's no point in human history where it was the right thing to do to not use a new technology to protect the way things were done in the past. Never a point. If we did that at any point in human history, we would literally be on horses now rather than have the motor car. The horse industry obviously was decimated when the motor car came in the 20s and 30s. But there would have been no stable owners who adapted a couple of their stables to service cars and started companies that are probably still around today. And that's the same with cover designers. I find it hard to have sympathy with cover designers who say, I hate AI, it's taken my work, it's slop, it looks horrible, I'm not using it. I don't know any cover designers who say that, but I do see them posting, and I talk about this on Substack, so I get quite a few comments on there. The cover designers that I know are using AI. Of course they are. It's just a tool. That's all it is. It's just a tool that's come along, and it helps them fill in the blanks. And it actually elevates someone like me when I do my ads. It elevates me from being slightly rubbish at it and cropping out bits of somebody else's work, basically my cover designer's work, with permission, of course. And now I can generate amazing looking advertising images with the right aircraft on it, etc. And so it's absolutely an onus on all of us all the time to adapt to the industry that we're in. When the industry starts changing, we adapt or we die. Basically, we stay where we were. It's the same in the animal kingdom. It's the same in the self-publishing industry. And so I think cover designers who are using AI and they can offer a range of services, they can absolutely say to some authors, if that's what they want, there will be no AI in your cover. It's going to cost them more. It's going to take a little bit longer, but they can increase their rate of production and they can increase the range of images that they are offering, because there's a lot more possibilities with AI than there is with the stock libraries. The stock libraries themselves are quickly adapting. Shutterstock now, I think, a lot of their images are AI derived rather than those old photographic ones. There's always going to be a place for some of that old stuff for authenticity. But that's more or less my view on AI. I'm pretty positive about it. I think there's a place for it. I think we need to adapt. We need to call out bad actors who are stealing. And on that question, of course, there's a big Anthropic court case going through. They're the people behind Claude at the moment because they, along with Meta, they lifted pirated versions of our books from websites to learn from. So the question about that, there are two parts to it. One is, should they have paid for the books in the first place? And I think that's a pretty straightforward yes, they should have done. Even if it was just the cover price, they should have paid us for those books. The second question is, were they right to use copyrighted material to grow their project, to build their tool? I actually think they were okay to do that, and so does the court. The courts come down on that side as well. And I think that reflects the way that humans operate. All of us as writers have read copyrighted material. We've read authors we love. So on the shelf behind me, again, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see some books like Flight of the Intruder by Stephen Koontz, and his third book was called Final Flight. I was completely inspired by Stephen Koontz, a fantastic writer. And when I first started writing my novel, it was basically a complete copy of a Stephen Koontz novel back in when I was like 19, 20. And then years later, when I started writing a proper novel, it was about my dad and my era, the era I was interested in, the 60s and the British. But Stephen Koontz's style of being authentic and being in the crew room bled into that. That's what I learned from. So I learned from copyrighted material. I did pay Stephen Koontz for the book, of course, because I bought it in a bookshop back in the day. And that's what they should have done. But they can absolutely, I think, build their tool on it. And the court has ruled the same thing, so that's fair use. Google built itself. It's an incredibly useful tool, Google, and it built itself basically skimming the entire internet, everything that was published on there. And yes, AI is incredibly useful, and there's a huge long list of its positive contributions to humanity, particularly in the medical sector as well. So if you're really anti-AI, you've probably turned off by now, your blood will be boiling and you won't want to be a part of this podcast, which makes me sad because there are going to be lots of things on this podcast that I think will have nothing to do with AI and are the fundamentals of storytelling, etc., that are more important now than they ever have been. So I'd love to have you with us, but I completely understand if my sort of pro-AI stance is not going to gel well with where you are. If you want to argue with me about it, I do have a Substack. If you go and find that, I think it's called Writing with James. I'll look it up. I'll put it in the show notes, the link, so you can post in there and I'll try and respond to you politely, of course, and respectfully, as we always do. So that brings me on to AI translations for authors. So this is a new course that I'm writing, and it's come from a place of solving a problem, which is the best type of online course that we've ever done, as well as answering a question someone's asked. And that is, the question is, how can I do AI translations right? Because we had a few tools come along. Scribe Shadow is the most famous. There's also Globe Scribe, and there's also just doing it chapter by chapter inside an AI. They can translate your book into myriad of different languages. The problem with that, and it became quite clear after a few weeks and months of us all doing this and all rushing our books up into Germany and France and Spain, is that the first draft isn't good enough. The one you get out of Scribe Shadow and Globe Scribe is probably the best, but it's still not good enough. And that's the truth of it. And I like these companies and I work with them. And probably will ask them for sponsorship for the show, but I have to be fair and honest here to everyone. I think it's a start, but it's not the end product. And I know that from the comments I'm getting on my books that come out of that product. And I know that because I've had a couple of them beta read as well. So I was trying to work out, well, how do we use AI to get a good translation? And that's when we started to develop, and I say we, I've worked with a couple of other clever people, started to develop a series of passes that starts with building a Bible, a handbook, a guide to your book. And that is used at every subsequent stage. So it brings consistency and accuracy to those stages down the line. Now, that takes a little while to build because it's specific to one book and one language. So the Final Flight German, for instance, would have its own handbook. And it's long. It goes on. You don't create all of this. The AI creates it, but you have to set up how to create it. And we have a very clever prompt to do that. Your next stage is the translation stage, which is best done chapter by chapter. The next stage after that is the accuracy stage, where we go back to the English. And this time we use a different AI, which is something I'm really huge about at the moment. It's like a ninja tip on AI use. If you're using AI seriously, you need to use more than one to check each other's work. It's a bit like humans. And treating AI more like humans than computers is a key way to work well with them as well, I think. So anyway, it's complicated getting this course together. The prompts have been the most complicated part of it, but that's what you get with the course. You get detailed instructions to make it easy to follow, and you get these prompts that are built in the first place for you. You obviously then adapt them for your book and your language, where you've got different prompts for different languages. You adapt them for your book, and you get your handbook out. The result is amazing. So I've changed my translations that are going up there, and suddenly my star rating's going up. And the big change on my French translation, I've noticed, because they were the first ones to say, because I think French is the most difficult one. They were the first ones to say, I think this is an AI translation, or the translation is really clunky and hard to read in places, but I quite like the story. They're the ones. Those comments have stopped. They've absolutely stopped. So it won't be 100%. And obviously, you've still got that $5,000 to $10,000 option of a human to do it. That will be your best bet as long as they're good, although I've had problem with human translation as well in the past. But we are really, really excited about this. So that's AI translations for authors. It's going out to beta in the next 7 days. So the first part of the course, the big chunky part of the course where it does all this workflow business, that's going out to my beta readers. And there'll be another round of beta in a few weeks, and then we'll launch hopefully this month in February. That's the aim for it. If you want to know more, if you want to sign up to the waitlist, there's going to be also an early bird offer just for the waitlist. So you need to sign up there if you want to get that. It'll be a really good offer to get it up and running. If you go to learnselfpublishing.com/AI translations, all one word. So I'm looking forward to that. Deep in the weeds on that. Couple other things to mention. So the Self-Publishing Show live. At the moment, it says on the website there are 4 tickets left, which is not many, for the show. So maybe even by the time this goes out, that will have sold out. There's a possibility of more tickets. So we have a site visit next week on the 10th of February. We're going to be looking at County Hall. We can have a sit-down conversation with them. Once we've done that planning, we will have a final number of how many people we can fit into the venue. And so we hope that number is going to be higher than the one the number of tickets we sold, not less, because that will give us some problems. There's also this thing that I know from organising this conference, and this is one of the biggest indie shows in the world, is that some people don't turn up. So there's usually a little bit of leeway on the total number of tickets. We can probably oversell it, a bit like overbooking an airline. So we will come up with a number, but there's, as it stands, as I'm recording this on Wednesday, the 4th of February, there are 4 tickets remaining if you want to come to the show. So it's on the South Bank in London over 2 days in June. It's got a fantastic lineup. You're going to get incredible tuition from people. You're going to get inspiration from people as well. And I'm very excited about it. The scheduling is in progress at the moment. We've announced quite a few of the speakers. There's a few more to firm up. But we're going to have, and we added actually Oriana from Kickstarter this week. So she's going to be joining us as well there. And excitingly, over those 2 days, on the night of the first day, which I think, top of my head, is the 12th of June. Is it 11th and 12th or 12th and 13th? I think it's 11th and 12th. So it'll be the 11th of June. But don't check the website rather than me. We are going to have a party boat. So reminiscent of what happened in 2020. just as COVID was breaking out. We called the Plague Ship then, but this is going to be a fun party boat. So Catherine and I went to London last week and we checked it out and it looks great. In all honesty, it doesn't look amazing from the outside like the last sort of paddle steamer we had last time, but the inside is perfect for us. So you have in the basement, you have a dance floor. It's going to be 80s and 90s bangers all night. On the mid-deck, you've got a bar, seating area, a bit more music, a DJ there as well. And on the top deck, you've got an open-air area with another bar up there. We've got space for 360 people maximum on there. It's going to be a Prosecco reception. It's going to be a first drink probably in that as well. We'll have to number crunch a little bit before we make that final decision, but you'll definitely get a Prosecco reception, and there's a bar on board. We'll do what we can with the drinks tokens for sure. And it's likely to be in the region of £40. So we think it's going to be a £40 charge. So it is expensive for us to hold this. I'm going to ask if we can get a sponsor as well to try and guarantee that we're going to get the coverage we need to pay for it. But if it ends up costing us a bit, that doesn't matter as a company, because it'll be a really fun thing to do. So that will be the boat. So look out for that. We haven't announced the ticket sales yet. We've got a few things, as you can hear me talking it through, to firm up. Once we've done that, the first people who get an option of buying a ticket for the party boat in the evening will be those who are registered for the conference. So those will go out first, and then after that, it'll go out to other people who can't make the conference but would like to come and network in the evening on the boat. We're going to see a lot of amazing London. You're going to pass the Houses of Parliament, you're going to pass MI5 and MI6, I should be pointing out to people in the evening on a June evening. So hopefully, fingers crossed, weather is good. It usually is for our conference. Okay, how long have I been talking? I don't know. 35 minutes. Wow. Jo Penn does this. She talks just by herself without a guest for a long time. I don't know how she does it. It's quite hard work. My last thing to say is that next week I will be revealing my co-host. So my co-host is somebody I've known for several years, somebody I hugely admire for the way they operate. They're somebody very plugged into the industry. They're usually first to tell me about a new craft book, or a new way of doing things. They also are very good at asking the questions that we all ask, and somebody who I am very comfortable laughing with and enjoying life with, and so I think it's going to be a good fit for the show, and that person will be revealed next week in the episode. You have to stay tuned for episode 434 next week for that. So that's it. This is the Self-Publishing Show. We are back, baby. We're back in the room. Hopefully this has landed on your devices because you were previously subscribed. Go and check out the Indie Writers Club. I'm going to talk about the Indie Writers Club in more detail next week because the Indie Writers Club is not going away. On top of the Indie Writers Club podcast, we had a Patreon. So you could join the Patreon, and so I think it probably starts at something like $5 a month. I have to check that. And has tiers going up. And that is for people who want the next level of podcast listening. So instead of just getting the podcast on a Friday, you also get a live chat with me, Q&A, and with my co-host at least once a month. You're likely going to get things if we have a guest on. We'll also put them live in the evening just for those people who subscribe. And that's a more serious discussion. It's a chance to ask more detailed questions about your work and what you're working on. It's also a chance to meet other authors and get to know them. It's been a brilliant little community. I absolutely love it. We had a live Q&A just a few nights ago. They're also mainly the people who, we give out the retreat information. So we do writing retreats now. That goes to the Patreon group first, and it's sold out this year. So we've got 32 people coming, which is a huge number for a retreat. We'll have to manage that. But that is just Patreon group people. So there's an opportunity for that. I'm going to talk about that in more detail next week and exactly how that's going to work alongside the Self-Publishing Show. But it's a very important community for me. It's the one I built from scratch from the beginning. And if you want to join us, I will give out that information next week. But go and check out the Indie Writers Club. Go and check out those podcasts. There'll be a few to listen to between now and next week. And I will see you next week.
Publishing is changing, so get your words into the world and join the revolution with the Self-Publishing Show.
The Self-Publishing Show is sponsored by Pro Writing Aid, built by writers for writers. ProWriting Aid doesn't just check spelling and grammar, it helps you enhance your story's pacing, plot, characters, settings, and more. Now it can provide even on-demand developmental feedback for your entire manuscript with its manuscript analysis and virtual beta reader tools. Give your writing a competitive advantage by heading to prowritingaid.com. Sign up for free and use the code IWC15 for a 15% discount off annual subscriptions.